I'm sorry, the old Cinderella can come to the phone right now. Why? Oh, because she's dead. Hello. If it's the first time that you are here on my channel, you can call me V. I make random videos. I make rant videos and reviews, book reviews, movie reactions. Maybe lately I have been. Today I am making a rant video. Oh my god, it's been so long since I've done a rant video on my channel, and I don't know why it took me so long. I have a lot to talk about today. I will be ranting and trying to offer some, I guess, constructive criticism on Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron. Now, like I said, I have made a bunch of rants on this channel. You can go and check them out. I believe I've put them in a playlist. This book was popular around, I believe, 2020. It came out in 2020. And it's funny because my last book discussion was on Malice by Heather Walter, which is also a sapphic retelling that came out around the same time as this book. So it's funny because they both came out around the same time. They're both sapphic retellings, and I didn't like either. The reasons that I did not like these two books are totally different. It's not that this book is problematic, it's that it's bad. And I don't understand why it's so hard to write a nice little sapphic fantasy book. Before reading this book, I did not know many things about it. Because sometimes I just generally prefer going into some books blind, because I just have found that sometimes it helps me, sometimes it sort of enhances the reading experience, because since I don't know a lot about it before reading it, I'm finding out as I am reading, and that sometimes can be exciting. Now, in this case, it wasn't that much. But to avoid spoiling you, I am just going to read the synopsis of the book. Of course, like you see here, this book features a POC protagonist. I'm just wondering, like, what makes a fairy tale retelling for you? In my mind, fairy tale retellings are more on the side of, like, we have different components that as a whole present you this story that is actually very similar to the fairy tale as you know it. And then there's stories like this. This is the sort of fairy tale retelling that takes the components of the fairy tale and just twists them into something else and tells you, no, that's not the fairy tale. That's not real, that's not the truth, and here is what, like, actually happened. You know, that's the kind of retelling that it is. It just changes the narrative a lot and just twists the characters of the fairy tale around and presents you an entirely new story. So it's an entirely new tale with the components of the original fairy tale. And, you know, I guess maybe sometimes that can be good. I can't really think of the top of my head right now an example that I have liked. But when it comes to specifically Cinderella, there have been so many versions of Cinderella. And, like, personally, my favorite was Another Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff. And again, what happened there was you took different components and just added them up and created this story that was a lot like the fairy tale. It's 200 years since Cinderella found her prince, but the fairy tale is over. Sophia knows the story through off by heart, because every girl has to recite it daily, from when she's tiny until the night she's sent to the royal ball for choosing. And every girl knows that she has only one chance, for the lives of those not chosen by a man at the ball are forfeit. But Sophia doesn't want to be chosen. She doesn't want to go to the ball at all, not when she's afraid the girl she loves might be chosen too. Pushed beyond breaking by a society that denies everything she is, Sophia sets out on a journey that will remake her world into one where she gets to choose. There's actually one lie here, but I didn't even notice before, but I will be mentioning it, I suppose, as we go further into the video. I gave this book 2 stars, just so you know. The book was boring, it was predictable, and it was just laughable. And when I say laughable, it was that kind of laughable that things are just so ridiculous, but they are treated in a serious way that it just it falls flat and it makes you laugh even though it shouldn't. Other than that, I will go ahead and provide you with some trigger warnings because I believe in trigger warnings. Hi. I think that you should know trigger warnings before reading a book, watching a movie, a TV show, because they're very important to your mental state. Graphic level of content, there was homophobia, lesbophobia, misogyny, domestic abuse, gaslighting, hate crimes, physical abuse, and sexism. Now, in the moderate level, there is classism, sexual assault, confinement, bullying, death, emotional abuse, violence, and blood. And minor trigger warnings would be toxic relationship, adult minor relationship, and gore. Like slight animal gore and gore. The rant section, oh yeah, I have sectioned off these types of things that I want to talk about. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the world building. So, you know how in some fantasy books with fantastical countries and stuff like that, there are maps? Well, in this one, there's no map, so forget about that. It's not that, you know, a map would necessarily fix this, but the scope of this world is so lacking. There is a very blurry understanding because we know that they live in this city that is called Lille. It is mentioned that it is in Marseille, and I don't know if that's, you know, the French city Marseille or if that's just an imaginary country. We know that there are like watchtowers and that like they aren't allowed to go beyond those areas. We are told, even though they can't get through to the other like cities, that the conditions of society and the living conditions are the same in the rest of the cities around Marseille. It's never told like what happens to the rest of the world. Like, is the rest of the world in the same level of like homophobic and sexist and all that like toxic like conditions? Like, is it all the same everywhere? Because I kept thinking when I was reading, by the way, this is something that is more mentioned in the beginning and around maybe first like third of the book, and after that it's kind of forgotten. Never mind. Because I kept thinking that maybe they think that everywhere else it's the same, and it's not. That they are in this very isolated country slash city that is actually this way, basically reigned by a cult, because the Cinderella thing is literally like a cult. It's literally a cult or a religion. Like, I don't understand why it wasn't described as such, because it was such a lost opportunity. I'm sorry, but like literally the only way that this would have made sense would have been if this was a religion or a cult. And it's never mentioned as a cult, or it's never dealt with as a cult. And that's what it is. It is. It is basically a city that is reigned by cultists. It's funny because people take it like it's normal. And of course, if you were indoctrinated into this cult, you would take things as normal. But like, the book doesn't say that it's like a cult. It deals with it like it's just something that could happen in our patriarchal society. And it's like, it's unrealistic. It's so funny. It turns funny when it shouldn't. Brutal things are happening and they're being excused because of a fairy tale. Are you joking? How are you telling me that, like, we can send someone to die because they think that the fairy godmother isn't real? The rules say, we're given like a board of how the rules are. One man in every household determines the lives in it. So one man in every household is made the head of the household, and he decides who lives and who dies and who blah 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 blah. So what happens to widowed women? What happens to women who can't have children and are widowers? What happens to women who have daughters and are widowed? What happens to widowed women who have sons that are children? Because I don't think a child can become the head of the household and decide if their mom is going to live or die. You know, like, that would not happen, because it would be very easy for an adult to, you know, control that. It would seem unlikely that women have this freedom when they're widowed and they don't have an adult man controlling them. So what happens? You know, it feels unpolished. It feels unfinished. There's no mention of an institution for orphans or widowers, and in a place where parents and children and gender roles are so important. It feels like it's a system that was just thrown together for the fun of it. This has lasted for 200 years. 200 years. How unrealistic is that? And why are we talking about realism in a story that's fantastical? Well, we are, because this story utilizes patriarchy, it utilizes domestic violence and abuse and violent homophobia and, you know, even race erasure, and like, it uses all these serious topics in its story. So because these serious topics exist in real life, that's why we're talking about realism. You know, it's a story that denies truth in fairy tales, and it presents fairy tales as a brainwash propaganda, like I said before, with how it looks like a cult or a religion, or in general like something that's dogmatic. So despite magical elements existing in this, it tries to handle this topic of like selling people fake ideas and propaganda about, you know, all these things that are about, you know, brainwashing your society. And that's such a deep and like such a very like adult thing to have as a concept in your story. And like, how am I not meant to take it seriously, to judge it seriously and realistically when it's such a realistic topic? So I'm sorry, but if we lived in a society where girls will be getting kidnapped, missing, turning up dead out of the blue, and a girl, literally in the story, a girl was executed for not wearing a nice gown. Are you joking? Literally, they go to the ball, which I will be handling a lot more of the plot later, but they go to the ball and there's a girl who doesn't have enough money to buy a nice gown, and literally the king is like, what the fuck is that abomination of a dress? Where did you get that? At Target? Did you get that off the dollar store? Get out. And he literally kills her. He literally kills her. And again, the thing with the fairy godmother, like, the fairy godmother is used as this way to shame people, to shame girls who are poor, because if you had been a better follower, if you had read the story enough, And if you had been like a good girl that listens to the Cinderella dogma, then a fairy godmother would have visited you, and she would have given you a nice gown, and she would have given you pretty shoes and a carriage. It's your fault that you do not have money to buy a gown. So get out of here. I can't, like, what? How are we how? It's just so unrealistic. It would never happen. I am going to back up my words and tell you why this would never have happened. Before I do that, people seeing no proof of the lie they're being told as real would make revolts happen. There would have been at least more people who wouldn't be as faithful to the story. Fear only gets you so far, all right? And as we've seen through history. So seeing this ongoing female slavery, because that's what happens when the girls go to the ball. They're basically just sold off to whoever claims them. Is this commentary on Sarah J. Maas's claiming of females through her fame, her books? Maybe. We see how they it gets basically sold off, and there are no rights protecting them from the abuse they're going to suffer. Realistically, there would have been progression. Realistically, there would have been revolts way earlier than 200 years, because it triggers a very primal part in society. I don't remember the words in English, but we had a class in my psychology bachelor's degree, which I have. Basically, there is this diagram in which as you are born, you are influenced through a circle of an environment, and the first environment that influences you is family. That is the closest unit to you as you're born, and the first that you are exposed to. So it is a primal part in society, family, that is. And so something that triggers that part, that is putting the lives of your family members on the line, would trigger people. There would have been reactions. If you're telling me that, why are you putting in realism? Because the book wants me to. The book talks about such realistic matters and such hard truths and situations that how am I supposed to not regard it as realistic and as it attempting to tell me about realistic issues? But it tells me about these issues in circumstances that are unrealistic. We are never told how things are before this king rose to power, before Prince Charming came along. There are mentions in the book oh my god, this was a revolt that almost happened, and they killed them and yada yada yada. But it's a very isolated event, and it shouldn't be. People that are the general public should have had more reactions and more behaviors that question their reality. Taking a look at real life, looked up the dress that Sophia wears. Through seeing what century this dress would have been a part of, it gives me a more cohesive idea of this setting that we're in. Are we in the medieval times? Where are we? So we are around 1840 to 1850s, and that was the Romantic era, I believe. It was the end of the Georgian era and the start of the Victorian era. Here are my photos for reference. Is that not exactly like this? It is. So, considering that this is the time period that we're supposed to be in a what-if scenario, the book suggests that from 1650 to 1850, nothing would have changed in the laws for equality and for women, and there would have been no progression whatsoever. Starting in the late 18th century and throughout the 19th century, rights as a concept and claim gained increasing political, social, and philosophical importance in Europe. Movements emerged which demanded freedom of religion, the abolition of slavery, rights for women, rights for those who did not own property, and universal suffrage. In the late 18th century, the question of women's rights became central to political debates in both France and Britain. So how realistic is it? Unless, which is my next point, if this was a country in which religion overpowered the government, if that rings any bells, such a situation would be the Taliban's in Afghanistan. Religion in general doesn't change throughout history. It remains the same. It would have made sense in that way if Cinderella again was handled as a religion or as a cult or something like that, or a radical something. But it's not. It's presented as an extreme patriarchal society akin to our own in real life way back when. Like I read you, it's not. Things were not like that way back when. So the ending of this book is also weakened because of this lack of realism and because of this lack of handling realistic problems, realistic issues we face even today to a different degree, but we still do. And it fails to handle these topics realistically. And you cannot use magical solutions to these real life situations, real life problems, you know, because saying that, we are going to defeat patriarchy in a day just comes off as campy and silly and unserious. You can't expect me to take these situations and this plot and this world building seriously when you are not taking it seriously. It can be okay if you suspend your disbelief a little bit. I can't suspend my disbelief to that degree where patriarchy and sexism and homophobia can be handled in a day, and then we live in a utopian world where everything is fine because it's a fantasy story. You know, it's just not. It's just so campy and it's so ridiculous. And if it owned up to that campiness the same way Barbie does, even to a degree, I am sad that I watched Barbie and loved it as much before reading this book, and it was just totally random that I happened to read this after watching Barbie. But the fact that they both try to handle patriarchy, and Barbie does it so well to an incredibly perfect degree, and this fails so miserably, it made the lack of realistic and deep writing that much more apparent because I read it after Barbie. As a last note, because this is the last thing we're going to talk about in the world building section, how can you enjoy a story where like the villain is patriarchy and somehow miraculously patriarchy is defeated and gone through these two characters who were brave? Okay, I guess let's move on to the writing style. So I don't have that much to say about the writing style because the only things that I actually noticed and was annoyed by were there was a lot of oversimplification and repetition at the point where I was like, I understand, you know, like you don't have to explain it anymore, you don't have to say it again and again and again. It was also written in first person, which personally I don't prefer first person when I'm reading a book. I prefer third person. That's not to say that I haven't enjoyed immensely books that are written in first person. I have. I guess statistically I could say that chances are I will enjoy a book written in third person more than written in first person. There were two jokes. For a little bit of context, they are at a lake and they're supposed to do some sort of ritual, okay? So this witch says, nudity is optional. But from what I can tell, we all have the same bits and pieces. And even if you don't, there's nothing to be ashamed of, dearie. I've seen my fair share of tallywhackers as well. Constance scrunches up her nose. I make her stop. I stifle a laugh. I feel almost euphoric in the light of the moon. It just gives me weird vibes, you know? It's like having male parts and identifying as a girl is a joke or disgusting. Because through the fact that Constance scrunched up her nose, which, you know, happens when you're disgusted or when you're irritated or just disturbed by something, and the fact that she says make her stop, it's like, why is this annoying to you? And also I guess the use of words tallywhackers is kind of weird, and the fact that Sophia laughed as if it's a joke to suggest that a woman might not have a female bottom part is funny. Why? It almost reads as a little transphobic. That's why it gives me weird vibes. And I'm not saying that that this book is transphobic or that the author is transphobic or blah, 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 whatever. I'm just saying that it's a weird joke. Why is it a weird joke? Because it gives me an impression that they think being transgender is funny or annoying or disgusting. It's an impression that it's giving me. It's not flat out saying anything about transgender people, but it's insinuating things that I interpret kind of like that. And I'm weirded out by that this exists in a sapphic story. But anyway, I may just be interpreting things a certain way when they're not intended to be taken that way, but at least it can be taken that way very easily since I took it this way. And then the next joke that I don't understand why it needed to be here is the fact that the witch, who is very old, disrobes and says, I'll go first, and she turns, like she takes off her clothes and goes into the water. So then it says, Constance slowly turns to me, covering her eyes with her hands. I was right. There is nothing in these woods scarier than you. I can't hold it in this time. My laugh rings out like a bell in the stillness. And this is sounding ageist. This sounds like, oh, old bodies, gross, scary. Like the fact that, you know, Constance was like, there's nothing scarier in these woods than you, and covering her eyes as this old woman jumps into the water. And then the other girl laughing about the situation. It's just like, Constance, you will age one day too, you know? Like, do you think that your body is gonna look threatening because you're gonna be old? What is this nonsense? Why do we have to make fun of old bodies, of aging, and why do we have to make fun of it, and why do we have to demonize it? I don't understand. So, like I was saying before, with the unserious seriousness, there were some corny quotes. Do not be silent. Raise your voice. Be a light in the dark. It just makes it sound like this is a manual for empowerment. This is feminism for dummies. Personally, couldn't take quotes like that seriously, especially in a situation that didn't handle sexism and oppression seriously and realistically. And maybe that's because I'm already so familiar with concepts of feminism. Maybe, I guess, like maybe if a child read this, they would be like, oh, this is new and like this is important, and maybe they would be provided with a fresh new outlook. But this is too dark for a child to read. I read you so many trigger warnings. This is not for children. So since this is not aimed towards children so that they can realize what feminism is and how sexism affects our society. Isn't there like a million other media, such as films and cartoons and things that are generally more accessible to so many more ages, that can teach them about these things? So to whom is this targeted? Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me because I'm so well versed in feminism and topics of gender roles and equality, but if you want to read about these things and become educated on them, this is not the book to teach you about that. Because it will teach you that there are these kinds of problems that we can defeat in a day, and they're not. Open a history book, please. The pacing in this book was medium. It starts as if it's kind of very fast, and things are happening. For me at least, it became boring. So even though the pacing wasn't slow, it was very boring. And at a certain point, I think around the middle of the book, it became a chore. Now we're going to go into the characters and the plot. Oh my god. Drink water. There came a time when I was adding this on my story graph that it asked me if there were lovable characters. To which I replied, no. Our main character is Sophia, and she's the girlie on the cover. So Sophia is a lesbian. She's with this girl, Erin, and as she's with this girl, Erin, and they have this secret sort of relationship, and they have been friends since childhood. They are reaching that age, I think 16, when they are meant to go to the ball and be chosen as brides and slaves. The other girl, however, is not that sort of reckless like Sophia. Erin is actually kind of like, you know, scared because of what they're doing being sort of illegal. Actually, there's not really much of a mention about Sophia being black. So even though this is representation for people of color, I wouldn't say that it's really delving deep into their struggles. There was only one issue that I found was mentioned, and I liked that it was being mentioned. The only thing was that as she is getting ready to go to the ball, there are these maids that are supposed to help her get ready, and they're like, oh, her hair, it would look so much better if we straightened it, right? Right, let's straighten it. And they straighten her hair and they put it in a hairstyle, and she's thinking like, no, my hair is fine. That's the only point that is made about her race, about her background. So there's no like cultural differences. Honestly, if it weren't for those few scenes, which I think there's like 2 of them in the entire book, it would have been the same if she was white, because it doesn't have much of an impact to the story. Of course, that doesn't, I'm not saying that it needs to have an impact in the story. Like, she can just be black and that's it. We don't really need to be making a fuss about her race, and it can just be normalized. But it's funny because in a world that is so impacted by sexism, by homophobia, uses these topics as the plot and as the world building and as the villains, the fact that there is no racism kind of, I guess. The only part that speaks to racism is that part about her hair. There are no stereotypes about her race in this society, which is weird because there's stereotypes about literally everything else that are extreme. Before they get to the ball, there is this boy, Luke, and Luke is a boy that is, I think, sort of a son of a family friend, or of a neighbor, and I think that her parents are trying to pair her with this boy, like, oh, he's such a nice man. Luke is gay. In the scene when he is revealing that to her, it was so obvious that that is what he was gonna say, but because she's so aggressive, she totally misses the hints, and it's just like, oh my god, what if he sends me to die because I'm gay, because oh my god, what if he knows that I am with Aaron? Chill out and listen to what he's saying. He's saying that he understands you. The ball of the palace is described, and we see that these old men are here to maybe even take 2 girls. Look, because he's gay, tells her, hey, we're gonna do this thing, I'm gonna claim you, we're gonna get married, and we'll fuck off this place and be fine and live our lives free. There's this classism issue where his claim isn't as strong as someone else who's richer. Sophia is smart, in her inner thoughts at least, and once the ball happens, which, like I said, there's a lie on the cover, because there's not like 1 ball, there's 3 chances that they go to the ball, and of course they're shamed if they're not chosen the first time, and it's like, oh, what a shame. She's like, oh, what scandal, she's going for a 2nd time at the ball. And it's even worse if you're not picked the 2nd time, because at the 3rd time you're considered pathetic. Oh my god, the 3rd time. And if you're not picked the 3rd time, then you're literally made into a servant. You're literally made into a slave, and it's not indirect. It's quite clear that that's what happens. Oh my god, what happens to the women that are servants and slaves and stuff like that? Do they address that at the end? I don't think they do. Oh my god, okay. Once the ball happens, she loses brain cells, and instead of acting accordingly to how she thinks things are gonna happen, she just confirms to us, the readers, the truth of her thoughts, because she goes ahead and does these things that she knows she has stated would lead to negative outcomes. For example, if this is too vague for you, she went to her family in the morning after the ball, and she ran off the ball, right? She escaped the ball, and they were like hunting her down. So she went ahead and hid in the tomb of Cinderella. And when she wakes up the next morning, the first thing she does is go to her family, and she is surprised that they tell her to go fuck off because you're an embarrassment, and what are we gonna do with you now? They're gonna kill us. And it's like, she's surprised, even though she knew they would react this way last night when she was running away from the ball. She knew what she was doing would lead to that outcome. So why the fuck is she going to confirm it? I don't understand. Sadly, she's the only character in this book that has some slight development. She feels the need to change Aaron. She feels the need to change the views of her family and her friends and abolish the patriarchal, woman-hating, homophobic mindset that they have adopted. By the middle, towards the end of the book, she realizes that her happiness doesn't need to stem from these people, and that people who love you and people who respect you don't need to be taught that they have to. So that was a nice little development, but at the same time, this vilifies Erin. She's a victim of the system, she's a victim of domestic abuse, and she's portrayed in this bad light, especially in the last scene we have of her and Sophia, where she's aggressive and not forgiving. She's not forgiving to Sophia or herself. She has this internalized homophobia and internalized misogyny, and she hates that Sophia doesn't. She hates that Sophia wants to change the world, that she wants to risk it all for freedom, and that's because she's too scared to do it herself. That's because she's jealous of it and she's too scared to do it. And it's human. It's human, and under the pressure of her family, it's what most Sapphic women in history did in order to stay alive. So why are we villainizing Erin for something so human and something that has happened, something that is realistic? Why are we doing that and bragging about how Constance, this girl that she meets randomly when she's hiding in a tomb, Constance, in comparison to Erin, would have fought for Sophia the same way Sophia tried to fight for Erin. Sophia looks like she's an angel, you know, like, oh my god, and she doesn't feel like angry towards her, and so she's viewed as this angel who, even though Erin has done so many bad things and treats her so badly, Sophia is fine with it, which, you know, I'm not excusing Erin. Sophia had to accept and respect that she can't change her, but we shouldn't be villainizing her, you know? We should be understanding and not be painting her in a bad light, because at the end, her aggressive behavior just seemed unnecessary to me. It just seemed like a way to further enhance how they're not meant to be together, which was a little dumb. Meet Constance. She tells Sophia that, oh, okay, I do not abide by the king. If you want, come and find me first light at that location. So, like I said, you know, Sophia wakes up, the first thing she does is go to her family and be a dumbass. People assume that Sophia is dead because that's what the king says. Let's get to Constance. So Constance appears as this mysterious lady, and at least she seems interesting. She seems intriguing until we get to know her. Funnily enough, I wanted to root for Sophia to get with her because she seemed powerful and wiser and more interesting. But Constance doesn't have character outside of her lineage, and her reveal of Manford, the king, being immortal and Cinderella being a rebel. She tries to, like, she reveals the true history around the fairy tale. She tells her, like, do you know why Cinderella's dad died? He was executed, he was hunted down, he was a revolutionary, and he, like, her stepmother was never evil. She was just a rebel, and she was made into this villain because she wanted to abolish the government. She wanted to go against the king. And her evil stepmothers, no, her stepsisters, no, they weren't evil. They were just trying to aid this cause. And it's like, it's like Prince Charming is evil. He's immortal. He changes his face every, like, something years and takes this new name and becomes king. But they weren't evil. They just wanted to take her back, take back their sister, and it's just... And it sounds like these stories that my dad used to tell me when I was young, that were like, you think Cinderella got to the ball and just forgot her shoe? She wanted the money. She intentionally left behind the shoe that was specifically made for her. Do you think that they wore the same number with anyone else in the kingdom? Hell no. She made sure she would be the only one that it fit to. And it's just so funny because I was a child and I was hearing these stories and I couldn't take them seriously, and I laughed and I was saying, Dad, stop it. So it's like my dad wrote this story, because what the hell? Why is Cinderella a rebel that wanted to kill the king? And it's not Cinderella. Like, this is a different thing completely. We're just using the same name. Oh, Constance is the, like, great granddaughter of Gabriella. And I don't understand why Drizella had to change her name. Drizella is not her name. Her name is Isla in this story. And it's like, since you kept Gabriella and Cinderella, why did you change Drizella's name? Justice for Drizella. Once Constance reveals her truth, like, about the fairy tale and about her family, that's all she is. She is defined by her duty to her family, and she keeps repeating 100 times about how it's her duty to fight this king, and she owes it to her family, who he has been trying to hunt down for centuries. And it sounds like a broken record. She constantly has this stick up her ass. I hate men, I know how to kill them, and I'm so annoyed by anyone. And oh, she's viewed as so amazing because she knows how to kill a man. She just knows how to kill men, and she is a descendant of Cinderella. That's her character. Literally, that is her character. Quick question. Do you think this shows great political leadership skills? They go into the woods, they think, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go try and find the fairy godmother. It's the fairy godmother's cottage. They find her, and she's not a fairy godmother, she's a rotting witch, as they realize when she drops her glamour at some point, and we see that she's just barely hanging on. So Amina, which is her name, was the most fan character in this book, and she was presented as a bitter old hag. So I don't know what that says about me, but she kept arguing with Constance, and I was living for it. But narratively, it's like a repetition of meeting Constance, because once again, ooh, you are not ready for the truth. It's darkest than anything ever. Oh my god, stop being so melodramatic. People don't talk like that. Okay? No other characters are given enough time or dialogue to have an opinion on. Manfred is pretty much an evil man, patriarchy. He doesn't really have a personality. He's just evil and was obsessed with Cinderella, and there's no explanation as to why he's like that. The romance. Oh my god, a sapphic love triangle. It's almost as bad as a straight love triangle. Nothing goes beyond kissing in this book, so it's not the kind of, oh, smutty, hee book, so if you want that, it's not that. Obviously, we're meant to root for Constance, because Erin is vilified for being too scared and having internalized homophobia, and Constance is a liberated woman. But it is insane how quickly Sophia is attracted to Constance despite loving Erin. It made the romance so unserious, and I couldn't care less because I would never trust her feelings. If she's attracted to someone else one day later, how are we supposed to take her seriously on her feelings and her inner turmoil? Supposedly, Sophia has guilt for her attraction to Constance, but really she talks herself out of it. I love having first kisses talking about my ex. Actually, I don't, but they do. They like doing that. Overall, the romance was very insta-lovey. There was no reason for Sophia being so undeniably, inescapably attracted to Constance. Maybe she fell for the savior syndrome or something because Constance saved her after the ball. And Sophia is always fantasizing about how brave Constance is. Like, what the fuck is there to like about this girl? You know what I mean? Like, she goes on temper tantrums, she can kill men. And that's enough for Sophia to get over her lifelong childhood first love and want to tie the knot, apparently. Plot twist and ending. The king makes like an announcement that there's gonna be like a last minute little ball. Everyone is invited, and if they're not chosen in this ball, they will die. Okay, there was some necromancy happening, and that was when I was kind of interested, like, necromancy. Because they needed answers from Cinderella, which is pointless. It all works like a video game to go to the next level with 5 side quests and like with some premonition shit in a lake, and it was just so unnecessary. We didn't really gain anything from that, but it is so painfully obvious how Manfred remains immortal, and instead of putting 1 and 1 together, 1 and 2 together, is that the saying? They go headfirst into chaos and stupidity. There is nothing more obvious in any book, in any other book ever, like than this, where they have a hint in the beginning with women being gone. The second hint is Liv, their friend who died because she had a bad dress, being old, corpse being old when she died and she was found drowned. The third hint is Cinderella being old when they find her tomb and her corpse. The hint 4 is when there's a light being mentioned as the last thing she saw, like a light, and Manfred did something to her and that's when she died. And the 5th hint is a light from Manfred in the lake when Sophia has the premonition. How is it so hard for you to put in one and two, whatever, together and realize that this man drinks the youth of women and kills them to remain immortal? How is it this hard for you to understand? How is it so hard? Oh, it's such a mystery. What is he doing? How is he immortal? Blah, 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 blah. And it's so stupid. It's so stupid. It was like it was made a mystery for 5-year-olds. We have the same old show how to use a weapon, because Sophia is the one that's going to the ball where everyone can recognize her and there's no fucking plan. I don't understand why Sophia is the one that's going when Constance is the one who knows how to kill men and has been bragging about it in the entire book. Why? There's no fucking plan, and somehow the plan is somehow use that dagger to kill him, even though we don't know how he's immortal, even though we don't know if it's ever gonna kill him. I'm gonna read you the fucking line because I fucking died when I read it. I fucking died when I tell you. I can't believe what I've witnessed. My dagger went straight into his neck and still he lives. Amina told me he was not a normal man. We assumed he couldn't die, but we hadn't considered that he couldn't be killed. We assumed he couldn't die, but we didn't consider he couldn't be killed. This has to be a comedy. Why didn't we fucking think of a plan B? What happens if he doesn't die? Like, we know he can't die. What is going on in here? What is there? Is there anything there? Is it? And then I figured out that there's a plot hole because there's prisoners in the palace because he uses them for youth. Why doesn't he kill them? Like, if he can do the drinking youth until they're barely hanging on to have an unlimited use of a girl because she can live again until he drinks her up to almost dying, leaves her alone, she's fine again, he drinks it until she's almost dying, same thing, over and over and over. Why so many? Since he has an unlimited use of a girl, why did he capture so many? Huh? There's girls who have been there for a very long time, but girls like Liv, who died after the ball, she died in one go. Like, why? Maybe this could have been explained if they are also raped and he likes to have a harem or something. But the book doesn't go there because it likes to pretend it's dark and it's twisted without actually being, because it's YA. Without any sort of explanation, it's a plot hole. The other girls tell her that he drinks their youth. Shocking. The second twist, because there is a second twist, is that Amina is not on their side. She is Manfred's mom. And it was so funny because they literally had a scene where they talk and they're like ignoring her over there. Like, it's so funny. It was like a scene out of a comedy. They had a scene of exposition where they talk to each other like, oh mom, you're so smart. Oh yeah, I told them that and that and it was all fake. And they're like, our characters are just sitting there listening to it and they're like, they're just continuing to talk as if we're not here. Like, what? What was that? What was that? What was that? It's like a cartoon villain explaining it all to the audience instead of killing their enemy. It literally is what that is. There's this exposition happening. There is a reference to a quote earlier in the book where they raised Cinderella from the dead and they did that necromancy that said the conjurer is tied to the corpse until death. And it's smart because Amina raised him from the dead, so if she dies, he dies. That's why he is fine, I guess. But then isn't that because he's drinking the youth of the... I guess the girls are for the youth and his mom is for the alive part. Why did Cinderella come back for seconds after she was raised? And I mean, I wasn't tied to her the same way she's tied to Manfred. And since that line was important in that spell that they did to speak to Cinderella for a bit, and Manfred's alive for 200 years because he died and then Amina resurrected him. How is he alive for so long? Is it that he remains alive because he drinks the youth of the girls? But then why did he die when they killed Amina? So they both die. Hooray, the Manfred and his mom dies. And guess who becomes queen? I cannot seriously tell you why I laughed, but I did. When I read, it didn't take long. It didn't take long for Constance to become queen as the last remaining descendant of Cinderella. But yeah, that's what happened. So yeah, she became queen even though she's literally useless. She doesn't know a shit about politics. But the epilogue says that some believed the changes from the ultra-sexist, homophobic and patriarchal system to a liberated equal rights one was too fast, but we believed they were needed. First of all, why do you have a say? Sophia, why do you have a say? Are you the queen consort now or what? Like, why do you have a say? Are you a politician? Second of all, obviously, you have no idea what you're talking about because people would rebel for their rights, okay? So, for the rights being changed, men would fucking rebel and have revolts, and even women would hate the state of things. This is what they're used to. Like, they have internalized it. They have internalized misogyny. How do you think that they would be okay with this? Suddenly changing out of the blue, and we have defeated patriarchy, and we don't care that some people are not very happy about it. Are you joking? Are you joking? The system change would never work. And how the fuck are they going to produce an heir, you know? Like, how the fuck is Constance going to produce an heir? Because monarchy is still on. She's still the queen, and it needs a firstborn boy. Hello? Monarchy is a patriarchal system. What are we doing? Why is it here? Unless we're going for a patriarchy, which will be toxic in its own way. Monarchy does not encourage equality, okay? Okay? That is not the way for you to go and make the point about equality. I'm sorry. 2 girls defeated patriarchy in a day. Actually, one of them did because she just killed the king, but all right. Where is Erin in all of this? Did she escape her violent husband? Was she accepted for being gay? She's just erased. We don't really care about her. We don't mention her again. So what did they believe they were wrong for being gay in the first place? Because it was illegal? Was it illegal? I'm not sure. Why would they accept it as legal even if it was? There is no mention of religion in this book that has shaped homophobia. It doesn't have the shape of homophobia from ancient Greece or Rome, for example, because even Luke was beat up for being gay, so it's not something that only influences the women's lives. That was a lot to say. So yeah, the homophobia doesn't even make sense at all, because homophobia is not just a problem of, you know, sexism, but okay. They never go beyond little, like we said. We never learn what the fuck's going on outside in the rest of the world. Like, I hope that we would, but alright, we don't really care. And that's it. I'm sorry, I don't have battery, I keep recharging, the time is passing, the light is fading. Overall thoughts. There were some positives in the book, like the relatable thoughts about homosexuality, about homophobia, because personally I am a Sapphic woman. And there was intrigue before learning about the incredible truth of the fairy tale. The strongest point of the book was the beginning. There's a mention about Snow White in another kingdom, which was interesting, but it was never mentioned again. I thought it would like be used as an opportunity to call on other fairy tales, to fight with them, or make them connected somehow. I don't know, what an oversight. It was boring, predictable, lacking ambition, uninspiring, tone deaf, and impossible to take seriously. That was my rant about this book, and I would like to know if you had any similar thoughts to mine when you were reading this book, if you agreed with any of the points that I made, if you enjoyed it or not, and I would like to know your opinion. Just please comment and help the algorithm, please like if you liked the video, and please subscribe if you did also. So have a great night and have a great day, and I hope I made you laugh, because that's what's important. Even if you loved or hated this book, if I made you laugh, I have succeeded. And thank you for watching. Bye bye.